A word to the wise. We are an explicit podcast tackling content with adult themes as well as entering spoiler territory if you aren't caught up with us. That point for us would be through chapter 51 of Iron Gold by Pierce Brown. If you haven't heard mention of a zoo in a while, you haven't read far enough.
Hey there, this is Cross.
And I'm PJ.
And we are Words and Whiskey, a podcast for veteran and novice readers alike. We tackle fiction novels and love to talk about what we're drinking. You should think of us as your drunk weekly book club.
Absolutely you should. And we do a great job of it, don't we, Crossland?
We do. We do so good at this all the time.
Mostly at being a drunk book club, but you know.
Last time I didn't drink enough, so this time we're going to fix that.
Oh, no. Oh, no. All right. So once again, folks, I am carrying you through this podcast. Crossland is going to be basically useless the entire time. So let's go. We're ready.
Let's go indeed. Today is our 8th episode covering Iron Gold by Pierce Brown, and we are going to tackle, as PJ mentioned, chapters 44 through 51. I just have to say this, PJ, every time you lead off that intro with a joke, I'm laughing. And so I have a hard time jumping into my hey there, this is Cross intro. And I about lost it this time.
I wasn't joking.
Well, I know,
but it was funny.
Right. It's just well done. It's just well done.
Sounds good.
All right. First, let's talk about what we're drinking. What are you having today, sir?
Well, I am going off of our first actual Patreon poll. So last week we did just kind of the, what liquor should I use? But this time we actually gave cocktails. So I gave the option of whiskey sour, old fashioned, screwdriver, and gin and tonic, I think, and said I would augment it from there. And whiskey sour won. So I went with a blueberry basil whiskey sour. Went with 2 ounces of rye, 1 ounce of lemon juice, 1 ounce of basil simple syrup, which I made a while back, 1 egg white, and a handful of just smashed up blueberries. Shook all of that, and then served it over a large ice cube with a couple of not smashed blueberries and a basil leaf for garnish. So it is absolutely delicious. I love this flavor combination just in general. Berries and basil. Mwah. Delicious. Love it. And it works really well in the sour.
That's interesting. So, out of curiosity, this is really just probing your intellect. Is it blueberries that goes well with basil, or are you saying any berries? My brain goes to a raspberry cocktail, so I think you'd probably do...
Yeah.
Oh, God.
I've done strawberry basil
probably a
beer
bourbon
before. I've done blackberry basil kombucha. Yeah, I just find basil with different types of berries tends to work well. I think raspberry would probably work out. I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting. Especially with a sour, I'm assuming that would be fine. So that makes sense. Yeah. So what are you following that up with?
I've got a crowler from Modest Brewing Company called Double Local Dream Mirror. So it is a collaboration with Black Stack, Modest, and Fair State.
It is, isn't it?
All of the three of them they all have their own New England mainstay. So Black Stack has Local 755, Modest has Dream Yard, and Fair State has Mirror Universe. So they all came together and did Local Dream Mirror, or they all name it differently because they all brewed it separately in their own places. So it's all variations of that name, but this is the Modest one, Double Local Dream Mirror. Let me take a sip, a little sippy poo. I had it at the brewery, but it's good. I'll tell you that much. But certainly a lot going on. I think it's almost too much going on. A little bit of restraint would have done them well, but they're mashing up 3 different beers and putting it into a single beer. So what can you expect? It's still good. Just a lot to take in all at once.
That's interesting. Interesting that they would choose to all kind of go in on that combination, but they're all great breweries, so I think that it's just wild that they would do that in the first place.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
What have you got for us today, Mr. Crossland?
Well, first off, this is my second episode of 5 that I'm recording this week in some fashion. So I have some tea that I've been sipping on while you were finishing going through the notes. So I'm finishing that up, but then I have a mojito here, which pretty straightforward. We've got some rum, we've got some limes, we've got some simple syrup, we've got mint, we have club soda, for sure. Right, which makes yourself a nice mojito.
Who are you, and why has Crossland been replaced with like a Finn? Or a Swede? I'm not really sure.
I can't help
Scandinavian.
but think of... You're right. I can't help but think of like the moose moment in Monty Python with the credits. It's exactly what came to mind. Yeah. I for whatever reason I typed club soda into the thing and I threw accents over top of it and I was like club soda and I laughed to myself enough where I was like, I'm fucking I can disconnect my headphones. I'm doing it for the show. So here I am talking into the void. You're not allowed to make a joke. Okay, I'm back.
Too late.
Nice. Shit. But yeah, the club soda thing. I was just like, you know what? I'm keeping it. So here we are.
I like how you have no idea whether or not I actually did make a joke at your expense right there.
I genuinely have no clue because I pulled the cord out of my headphones on accident. So that was great. And then to follow it up, I am having the exact same thing I had a week ago. Double candy, which is the double mountain candy from Sycamore. Again, it's okay. I just didn't have enough time to run out and get a different beer. So
hey, it is what it is, right? This was a quick turnaround.
Like I said, we're drinking more today, so that's the goal. We're gonna.
Yes, we are.
Tasty. I only have an 11 a.m. with a lawyer tomorrow. It's gonna be fine.
That's fine.
Not for Jesus. Not for any personal reasons. For work. I just realized how that could come off. Jesus. All right. Okay. So with that, let's go into last week's predictions. We really just have the mini Deadpool to talk about.
Yep. So my intention, by the way, was for this Deadpool to start and end by this week. So I don't know if you want to adhere to that. I
mean, that's up to you.
That was my intention. And I mean, we might as well go by it because I'm mostly wrong.
All right.
I got a couple of key ones.
Yeah, you did.
So for sure, we have Cassius is dead and Seraphina is alive.
Mm-hmm.
As far as we know, Cavex is alive.
I would say, given your constraints, we can call him alive because he's alive, but might not make it, was the way that Niobe put it.
Exactly. So
that's 3 for me.
3 for you. I said, 3 for you. I had said the Ash Lord would be dead. Apollonius would be dead. Romulus would be alive. I guess
Romulus is alive, so
yep.
And Dido is alive.
Yeah, but I said more like Dido.
Yeah, right. So Romulus, I'll drink for.
Okay, so Romulus, there we go. And then I said Dido would be more like Dido. So I've got 3 to drink. You just drank 4.
Mm-hmm.
I came out ahead on that.
You did. After us, just concluding to do it this way now, for the record, because we were going to do it entirely differently before the show, and we decided on the fly. So there we go, I guess. I mean,
it was cumbersome to carry over the Deadpool last book, so.
Yeah, that's fair. There are only 2 more episodes after this one, though, you know? It's like, we're close.
Yeah, all good.
Oh, boy.
Oh boy.
I've gotten requests for people to just put out a list of characters for Deadpool for next book.
All right.
But
I'll tackle
people are like, we kind of want to know what you think. So we'll see. Anyway, moving into it, let's get into the chapters. So we have a lot of ground to cover today. I feel like every time I've said that, we've gone really fast. compared to other times, and
there's times when we're like, it should be a quick episode, and we go 4 hours.
Yeah, that's awful. It makes no sense. Our patterns make no sense. Okay, so with that, chapter 44, we start off with Lyria with a quick chapter, Lion Guards. So this is kind of the resolution chapter to last week. Lyria finds her weapon confiscated in the custody of the Republic and facing down none other than Holiday T. Nakamura, the intimidating Howler she had bumped into before, and the one of course that we know and love from the last series and otherwise. She's quickly muzzled and restrained before she's walked from the room.
So
that muzzle, though.
That muzzle, though, is pretty interesting and effective.
Wow, the idea of actually pulling your mouth open and just depressing your tongue so it can't even move is terrifying to me.
And we know from later on when she gets it off that it attaches to her gums somehow, because she's putting her tongue against the dry spot where the muzzle was attached. The way I imagined it, it was kind of like something that was almost like a dual-sided mouth guard that had a balloon that inflated on the inside of the mouth.
That's interesting. I thought reverse ball gag. As opposed to having the ball gag in your mouth, you've just got the things tearing your mouth apart and then pressing down.
Okay.
Ugh.
Either way, not comfortable.
Similarly bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason I thought something a little bit more inflated and more invasive to the mouth was because she couldn't breathe through her mouth at all. So it's something blocking her actual mouth hole, because she was freaking out.
Yeah,
and
that's a good point. That's why Holiday was breathe through your nose.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, the other component that fits that as well is the armor restraining vest that she had to throw on, where inflated and then turned into armor. That was fascinating as well. Just kind of cool stuff, very, very sci-fi. If I could describe this chunk in any way, I would say that this feels like the most cyberpunk-ish bits that we've gotten, especially when we get into Ephraim kind of walking around the city in the later part. But
yeah,
it's pretty cool all around.
Definitely more futuristic within our own understanding of the world, as opposed to a future version of ancient Rome.
Yeah, it's so interesting because this series is generally, or especially these second two books, are generally considered a space opera in large part, wherein the first trilogy you might not describe that way. I'm not sure how you'd describe it, but these, where I struggle a little bit with the space opera definition is, yes, there's this huge theater of war and there's all of these spaceships clashing against each other. There's also a grounded nature in whenever I think space opera, I think Star Wars. And that, to me, well, you just naturally, you kind of gravitate towards Star Wars or a couple of the other big ones that are out there. But this doesn't have as many fantasy elements. And I think more than anything else, Pierce Brown is trying to ground this in reality. And it has done such a good job throughout this book, trying to kind of reframe a lot of the things that might have been distant or not well described and give them real grounding in real not real scientific, but explainable definitions. That doesn't fully make sense. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think so.
And then they run. After they get Lyria restrained, she basically gives her command to run. Lyria runs, confronted with the rain and night once again, like we've seen so many times again on Mars the previous day when she was running up the 90 flights of stairs. And she is getting in a mysterious shuttle with a formidable escort of wardens protecting her from none other than Victra and the Barkas.
Mama Bear Victra, right? She is fearsome. And wasn't Victra in a ship though?
No.
No,
there were some rip wings that were taking off after her, but she was flying around in grab boots.
Oh yes, you're right.
Holiday's sitting there on the shuttle, of course, and there's relay about the prisoner, about Lyria, and basically Holiday is threatening her and asking her to back down, telling her that there's going to be no restraint held against her, and Holiday says, "You don't want trouble," and Victor just responds, "Darling, I am the trouble," and it's just fucking great. It feels like Cruella de Vil to me a little bit. I don't know, and that's not just the conscious mind moment right now that is Cruella coming out into theaters, but it feels very, very much of that vein.
Right.
So they make it to the Citadel after a brief chase with Niobe fully equipped in blue armor, ready for war. I fucking love that visual. Yeah. Just right at the end of it.
So who do you think she's planning on facing off against? Do you think it's against Victra, or do you think it's against Lyria and whatever threat she might be posing, not knowing who she actually is and what she's been stowing away as on her ship?
I think it was Victra entirely. I think it was mostly a show of force more than anything else, just to dissuade them from, fighting each other. And so her showing up is a big, serious deal. And as proven in not in the next chapter, but in the next Lyria chapter, she's angry. Like, she is upset and not having a good time with what's going on.
Who is having a good time in this entire section of Crossland?
Not Tharsis, that's for sure. Not
Tharsis. I guess Apollonius is kind of having a good time.
Apollonius is kind of having a good time. Darrow's having some fun. A little stressed, but not bad.
That's fair.
But as far as it goes on Luna, no one's having a good time on Luna.
Sad town. Sad town right there.
Without a doubt. So with that, we move into chapter 45, Darrow, Venus. I love right off the bat the creation of Venus that happens over the course of the first page and a half. It's just absolutely incredible writing and starting to get some of that description and how the worlds are terraformed. We kind of get some of the posts. We've heard about the world engines. We've heard about things like that. But to actually get the reason and sort of the way that things went over time on Mercury is this almost like childhood fairy tale from Darrow's perspective that he's reading to us to explain Mercury, because he's never been there himself. So all he knows is the history books and what the books have told him. It's sorry, I said Mercury, I meant Venus.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
I love the first line that goes into that sort of fairy tale description. Once upon a time, Venus was the evil sister of Earth, swollen from the solar dust to similar shape and size. Evil sister of Earth is a good descriptor. The sort of personification of the planets, and Earth being the cradle of humanity, if you want to point it out that way, within the solar system, or of life, and Venus just being kind of the toxic antithesis. It's a cool descriptor.
I agree, and also just to tag into that a little bit, the sort of way that he describes also stealing the helium from Jupiter and then using that energy and all of that to create all the water that flooded Venus is fantastic. There's just so much that actually kind of paints it as this interesting creation myth in a way that Pierce Brown has written here over the page and a half. It feels like it feels like a creation myth in the way that Darrow recites it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's completely human controlled. It's completely just prose.
Yeah. That doesn't make it not creation.
No, yeah, right. I just mean it's not a myth, but it's framed like a creation myth. So naturally, I want to talk a little bit about that line that Alexander, I almost said Lysander, quotes from the Aeneid by Virgil here. So the quote, even then, Cassandra's lips unsealed the doom to come, lips by a god's command never to be believed or heeded by the Trojans, which is on page 425. So Cassandra at the time was considered the seer, whom was not listened to, specifically in regards to the Trojan horse. There was, I believe his name is Lacum. I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce that, but he also was another one of the seers. And I think in the Aeneid, he shot the Trojan horse or was bitten by snakes and killed. I think he shot it with an arrow and then was subsequently bit by snakes because the gods foretold that this was going to be the way that fate went. And so people didn't listen to Cassandra, but she foretold, of course, that the horse would be filled with men and told the leaders to consider retreat, but they thought her foolhardy and thought that it was gift, of course, because the beaches were empty and it appeared as though everyone had left. And so she correctly predicted fate and the fates of the Trojan War. There's an implication here specifically, though, as it lies to why Alexander is saying it, where we are basically the Trojan horse. And so if they have their own version of Cassandra, there's this implication that they could also be given away by something else, that they are also carrying someone who could communicate away from them to give away the ghost, or that they could potentially be the victorious party here. Either way, you can read into that. But, of course, Rona's your stand-in in this conversation, basically being like, shut the fuck up, Cross / Alexander.
Pretty much. Ah, yes, Nilton.
Milton. I know. It's like, no, it's not Paradise Lost, you idiot. Like, come on. Not really an idiot. Rona, we love you.
Well, thank you. As Rona, I appreciate it.
Do you? I don't think Rona appreciated any of it.
No, not really. It's a fun historical tie-in, though, as all of these are. But it's the least... It's the most direct and also the least gleanable, if that's a term.
Agreed.
Like, clearly, like they are aware of the parallels being drawn between that quote and what's happening, but because they're the ones drawing it, they can't actually know what the future holds. Mm-hmm. So it's not actually ironic foreshadowing. It's just them reading into what they're doing.
Yeah, right, exactly. So there's a sense of confusion here elicited on our end for sure. And I mean, again, I think that there's also kind of maybe a little bit of a meta commentary going on here from Pierce's perspective, if you think about it, where he's like, I constantly quote all of this like Silpsopic shit. And then like another character is just like, fuck you, shut the fuck up, dude. And it's a nice like little battering ram that way too, in a meta way from the character's perspective of maybe it's not that important. Maybe it's more about the story. Get some of your other bullshit out of the way.
Yeah, not everything's regurgitated from ancient texts.
Yeah, not every plot point, not everything. So yeah. It's an interesting little bit here. I like Darrow's little teaching lesson here with Ronan and Alexander as well. I think that it's fantastic. It's interesting because they both kind of get their own lecture regarding why paying attention to briefings is important, and the subsequent comment on Alex needing to not be an asshole is great. It makes you kind of think about the kind of father that Darrow really is to the people he can be a father to. He's, a strategist, not unlike that of Lorne, or perhaps a younger Lorne, as we could imagine. And he's got a very, we never ultimately get to see, at the very least in this book so far, we haven't really gotten to see him be a true, consistent father to Pax. And so he's kind of stuck out here and is mentoring people in the capacity that he knows how to.
And what's kind of cool to see is that it proves that he could be a really great father. He understands the nuances of treating different people differently based on their own personalities and what they're thinking and their circumstances. I mean, that's the mark of a great mentor, but also the mark of a great father. He's kind of playing that role, even though his own son doesn't get to benefit from it, which is tragic. And I wonder if that understanding is lost on Darrow at all, or if he's really aware of it.
I think it might kind of, because he doesn't comment on it in the moment, it feels like it is kind of a loss on, or it is kind of lost on Darrow. Not that he couldn't be a father to Pax, just that he isn't. And I think he's aware that he isn't being as much of a father as he'd like to Pax. So I guess that's interesting.
Doesn't he make commentary on how he wouldn't be a great father anyway, though?
He does say that he doesn't think that he would make a great father, but that doesn't mean that he wouldn't practice, because he's not even trying.
Right. That's a good point. Good point.
So it's not like our narrators aren't perfect, omniscient narrators, so it's not like, we can completely take it at face value, but as fact, I should say, we can take it at face value. It's interesting to follow up this sort of like lecture on fatherhood and things like that with the subsequent lie to Alexander, as well as his reflection on Alexander as kind of a proper heir to Lorne. The fact that he lies about him, like, yeah, I'd totally go back for you if like we needed to. And it just, ouch, Yeah.
But
Alex believes him, but Rona knows that that's a lie.
And I think this goes back into what we were just saying about him being a good father figure in this scenario. But he's doing what he thinks will produce the best operational behavior from Alex. Honestly.
That doesn't make a good father, but yes.
But he understands that he can't treat every single person under him the same way, because they are individuals and they think differently from each other. And he knows Rona would respect no, we've got to do this. This is the mission. You're not above that. Mm-hmm. And Alex needs to hear, yeah, I'd come back for you.
That's fair. That's fair. Do you think that Alexander makes a good or proper heir apparent to Lorne?
I don't know yet. He hasn't really shown his philosophical side yet at all.
Didn't he just quote the Aeneid?
Cool, he knows a book. Isn't the point? Isn't one of the main points of Lorne how he's so much more than just quoting books in situations that they're in? He embodies kind of a way of thinking, and maybe I guess I don't know well enough to know if Alexander is on the right path for that, other than the assertions from Darrow saying that he is.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. I guess like the thing that I would posit back is obviously he's much younger, right? So there's the whole like with age comes wisdom kind of commentary. So maybe there's some of that, but maybe he just sees flecks of Lorne in him, and that's why he believes that he's, the closest thing.
Yeah, and I mean, he's obviously of Lorne's blood, so you probably physically see him in his face.
It's interesting that Darrow himself doesn't look at himself and realize that he is becoming Lorne, Like he's never... I think he did maybe at the very beginning of the book, but he's not thinking about it all the time. So we move forward with Apple, and Apple is treading on very dangerous ground, talking about Victra the way that he does. What a fucking son of a bitch, right?
Yeah. It does make me think, is he saying all this just to fuck with Severo? Or is he just genuinely accustomed to talking about women like that?
I think it's both. I think that he talks about women like that, and he knows that talking about her that way is going to fuck with him.
Okay. I can perfectly accept that.
I can't believe that Severo held it together and didn't just like blow up the bomb in the back of his head right then and there.
I was curious if something like that was going to happen.
Yeah. It's probably why you thought about the Deadpool and were like, Apple's going to die right there. This is it.
Yeah. I wasn't thinking that he'd actually kill him, but I could have seen just Severo making a show of like getting towards the button.
Mm-hmm.
Not that we know what the trigger device is at all. Like that hasn't been explained yet.
Darrow says that he is a trigger.
Yeah, but is that like a button on a dongle that they carry around? Is it like a switch on the ship? Like how does that work? We know that it's triggered. We just don't know physically what it looks like.
Yeah.
Unless I missed it.
That's fair. I think he was thumbing the button when they were walking in it at certain points. Like he was tight on it. So
okay.
I want to say that it was either, you could say that might be embedded in the suit or it might be a physical button.
Okay.
Not perfectly clear.
Gotcha.
So far as I recall. So I have to point something out here that I think is interesting. Darrow here is thinking about the different Valley Wrath brothers and the Wrath brothers, and he's fully aware of Tactus's nature. And I don't feel like it's controversial to point it out whatsoever. He quotes, "Even Tactus, the most faithful of the brothers, couldn't be trusted farther than you could spit." And I feel like there's no better indictment of the way that I think of Tactus than that.
Yeah, I can agree with that, but at the same time, is this thinking and is this comment strictly in hindsight, looking through the lens of the post-box Darrow, or just Darrow after a time of pondering the situations? Like, did he really think of Tactus this way when he was trying to like save him?
Oh no, definitely not. Definitely not. With you on that. He definitely did not think of Tactus this way at the moment. Of course not. He believed that there was a chance for him. But current Darrow does not believe that there's a chance and understands that there was no way that Tactus was fickle.
Right. Which
I constantly say and point to.
Yep, you do.
That's it. all I want to do here, folks, is I want to point my little pinky finger at it and be like, "Hey, see that? That looks like pretty good evidence." And then I'm going to back off and I'll be done about it for now. Got him my little bit. So we're introduced to Vorkian here, a lieutenant of sorts of the Valley Wrath family, who appears to be incredibly loyal to Apollonius, of course, himself. I love the quote that he kind of gives her, and sort of the demeanor of the orders and the way that she respects him is really interesting and bizarre. I talked about Star Wars a little bit, but it's in almost an Emperor Palpatine kind of way, where it's like, "Oh my God, you're back!" Like, yeah, of course I'm going to listen to you. Or a Darth Vader way, where it's like, "Yes, sir, definitely, most definitely." And Apollonius says, go ahead.
The vibe I got off of it was Lilith and the Jackal.
Ooh, similar. Yeah, that's a good call. That's a good comparison. He says, pass the word, take the Ashmen to the barracks, douse them with engine grease, and light them on fire. Then cut off their heads and arms and feed them to the crabs. What in the fuck, dude?
Okay,
the crabs? How big are the crabs?
Well, I mean, it's already dead, chopped up meat, you know? It doesn't matter
Fair.
how big the crabs are. I think it would have been better if they were fed to the crabs alive. But, you know, death by crabs is something to be...
Without
to strive
arms?
for.
Like, fed to the crabs without arms?
Yeah, and with burny flesh.
Does this not seem like some Ramsay Bolton shit?
Oh, absolutely. Except, no, it's too fast of a death for Ramsay Bolton.
Well, agreed. Maybe Tharsis is more in the line of Ramsay Bolton than Apple is, but I think of kind of the way that he commands respect. I guess Ramsay doesn't really command again, TV show basing this, because I have to clarify that, otherwise I'm going to get a multi-paragraph essay about misconceptions. Love you, Tim.
See, in this scenario, I think what Ramsay Bolton would do is take them and draw like circles of engine grease all the way up their arm, and then light the first one so it slowly, like a cigarette, moves its way. The fire moves its way up the arm. I think that's how it would go.
And you'd also do it personally. That's also why I think it would be that Ramsay is maybe more adequately compared to Tharsis, considering he's considered the torturer and the vampire of Thessalonica and whatnot.
Boiling people.
Yeah, boiling people for sure is a dead giveaway. Dead giveaway. So we move on from that to an interesting poolside scene, of course, with Tharsis just kind of relaxing, chilling with his concubines, hanging out with some golds and some pinks, doing laps in the pool.
Relaxing out by the pool.
Just, you know, like just pre-orgy. Like that's what's going on here.
Pre or post or in the midst of, it's hard to tell.
Yeah, it's very hard to tell, especially considering the like little wine bit that was there. That was
it was weird.
it's weird, but it's well written, and it's just like, you know, that this army, this like squad, this hit squad is just lurking outside, like just watching this, and you're like, huh, why are you watching, guys? Like, why are you doing something? But I think they were just kind of letting him, you know, be distracted. It's an interesting scene nonetheless. But then they walk over, they have their little confrontation. Apple reveals himself, and Darrow fucking opens fire on everyone. And it's just a fucking bloodbath.
Bloodbath. The way this is described is so much colder with Darrow with a gun. This is kind of the first real descriptive moment we've gotten with like Darrow really kind of taking charge with a gun as opposed to a razor. And it's brutal and it's cold. It's really, really cool. I'm sure there are other scenarios where it's described of Darrow shooting people, but like not like this, I feel like.
No, not at all like this, and I think that's what's so shocking. I don't think that we've seen. Have we seen anything since then? The only other moment that we've seen where someone has been killed, I think, in this book by Darrow is Wolfgar.
Yeah,
right. Like it's just Wolfgar, and now it's these folks, and it paints a very violently changed Darrow. One that, you know, like we said, we've only seen Wolfgar, and he was regretful, mournful about Wolfgar because he was an ally.
Mm-hmm.
But Jesus, like war is different.
Yeah, Darrow is different here.
Yeah, calloused, truly.
But it was still fucking cool. Like,
yeah, that doesn't mean it's not cool. It's I wouldn't
Darrow, have it any other way.
You just kind of want Darrow to be your wholesome good guy, but he's
no, you don't. I don't think you really want Darrow to be the wholesome good guy. Like you want him to be a little brutal.
But now he's kind of like the Terminator.
Yeah, isn't that awesome?
It's very sweet, but you're also like, ooh, Darrow, you're kind of not a really good guy. Like, oh no, dude, oh no. Do you have anything else to say about this chapter before we jump into the next one?
No, I just want to reiterate how cool it was to see Darrow just fucking explode people's heads with just without care.
Last comment for me on this. This whole scene, actually, the end of the scene, actually the entire scene, lends itself very easily to adaptation. You can imagine exactly the way that these golds are defending themselves, some charging at them, some just raising their hands in defense as they're shot through the hands and through the head, exploding out the back. You can imagine the pinks wandering away because they recognize what's about to happen, and some of them even offering kind of vague support, understanding who this is and what's going on. It's fascinating.
Yeah. And it's also what I would actually, more like what I would imagine a futuristic war scenario to be like, as opposed to with the razors, which is cool, but guns are so much more practical in scenarios like this, you know? Or it seem like they should be. They seem like they should be. Like this right. Makes more sense in my mind when I think about a futuristic hit squad.
Right. This isn't about honor, and Darrow doesn't treat it with any kind of honor. Old Darrow might have given them the chance.
I think old Darrow probably would have tried to save all of them.
Correct. Yeah, entirely. Would have given them either an out to go run away or otherwise, but this is a changed Darrow.
Yeah. Old Darrow, I don't think would have trusted himself enough to break Apollonius out like he did.
No way. No way in hell. There are varying layers of confidence that have came with Darrow with the 10 years of experience that he has now. And yeah, he's very confident in this plan.
Right.
So with that, we move into chapter 46, Darrow, the Brothers' Wrath, W-R-A-T-H, of course, versus, the regular spelling of R-A-T-H. It's interesting because
regular spelling of wrath.
Well, the regular spelling is we're used to in the book, dude. Okay. Give me a break. The proper noun. What do you... I mean, obviously, the title here is very fitting for the way that the chapter goes, because it's a fucking nightmare to read. It's... I don't know what you get out of this, but every time I read this chapter, it is just stressful from Apollonius's perspective of just absolute paranoia. I don't even know how to describe it. It's stress.
Yeah.
It's pressure.
Yeah, it's intense. Whole lot of intensity.
Yeah.
But just, unsettling stress. Really unsettling. Unnervingly complex in its, like, unpredictability, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot there. Talking about Tharsis, though, what a fucking pixie, right? Like, Jesus.
Yeah.
We've met all three of the brothers now to a fuller extent. We can kind of get a picture of all of their characters. What do you think of the Brothers' Wrath?
So, I think the only one that anybody should really be scared of, comparatively to all the others, is Apollonius. Like, the other two are fucking bitches comparatively. That said, they're all obviously really capable in their own right. And that just is a testament to how ridiculous Apollonius is, you know?
Without a doubt. I guess I kind of course, Apollonius is just so ridiculous and just, he turns into 11 as far as characters go in a lot of different ways. I think what's so interesting is that Apollonius is a fan favorite, of course. Maybe not, of course, for you. But part of like Pierce Brown's mentality when he thinks about Apple is he's like, I just basically have permission to be as ridiculous as I want because his character is so believably self-obsessed and fascinating in that way where he just kind of gets to do whatever he wants. But it also fits kind of the hedonistic tendencies of the Brothers' Wrath. However, Apple is kind of this reformed dude is also weird. It's just bizarre.
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of want to pull you back to Tactus for a second and talk about him a little bit. How do you imagine Tactus would be 10 years later? Besides dead and in the ground, if you were alive.
He's kind of a puddle at this point, right? That's just how...
Correct. How things go.
Matter works. 10 years later, in what scenario?
If he didn't die at Lauren's hand.
If he didn't die at Lauren's hand and Darrow was able to convert him?
He sticks with him. Yeah.
Sticks
we'll
with
put it that
Darrow.
way.
I think he probably ends up very close with Mustang and works very closely with the Senate and distances himself a little bit from the Howlers.
Interesting. So let's extrapolate that a little bit. Let's put him in this scene with his brothers. How does he fit into this trio?
I mean, he's obviously the youngest brother, right? I think he's probably mostly timid in comparison around those two, just based on how they've been raised. But given 10 years of working alongside Darrow and Severo and the Republic and everything, I think he probably steps up and takes control of the situation a little bit and acts as almost a mediator. Comes into his own confidence a little bit more.
I've always felt like his brothers would talk him down to a point where he would just shut up and would have to have someone else like step in for him.
That's what I'm saying, is he'd be timid normally, but I think given 10 years of kind of helping lead a rebellion and lead a new society, Republic, I think he'd come into his own as far as confidence goes.
Okay. Just curious. Any other thoughts on Tharsis as the piece of shit sits there on the ground?
Not necessarily of Tharsis, but of Apple. I think it's false forgiveness and false understanding, absolution. I think
that he's giving Tharsis.
Yeah. I think there will be revenge for not getting him out.
I think it's interesting. I think I kind of agree with you, but I think that the revenge, I don't think he's going to kill the dude, right? I don't think he's going to ruin him. I think he probably wants him to have kids because, like you said, they're the last two. But I definitely think there's some kind of something coming. And I think that's also why he didn't stop Severo from cutting off his ear, right?
Yeah. Though that was a pretty swift little movement mid-conversation.
Right, but Tactus didn't move. He just stood there, right? Because Darrow's at the ready to prevent him. Sorry. Yeah, Apollonius didn't move. Jesus.
Yeah.
But yes, Apollonius didn't move, and Darrow was just standing there at the ready to prevent anything in case it happened. So,
I mean, he's acting like Apollonius was in the jail cell.
Yeah, true. The whole scene of the interrogation with Tharsis, from Severo liberating him of his ear, as we've mentioned, to Apollonius's rage, to the calm of brushing Tharsis's hair, all of that is just excellent mastery of tension from a writing perspective. But also, how insane do you actually think Apollonius is?
I don't think he's insane at all. I think he is perfectly sane. I think he is twisted. I think he maybe has some dark views on things, but I don't think he is out of his mind at all. He's cold and he's calculating, and I think he's plotting very much and very explicitly throughout this entire thing. He's not letting anything get past him, even if he seems to be really cool about Tharsis just kind of indulging himself in the pool while his brother rots in the cell, as far as he knows.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's cold, but I don't think he's insane. Does that make sense? Is that a worthwhile distinction between the two?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think that it's interesting because the reason that I asked the question to a varying degree is because the way that he addresses it when he's called mad, or when Tharsis even says that mother deemed you mad, the way that he reacts and responds to that the two different times that it happens feels very Joker-esque. I think I said this before, but in the way where he's like, no, I'm not mad. I'm not mad. He's kind of like beating it out of himself as though he's misunderstood. And I think that kind of fits into your theory here that he is twisted, but he's not actually insane. He's misunderstood.
Yeah. And obviously that's a pain point for him. Like that is a pressure point of being called crazy or mad or insane or whatever is not something he enjoys.
I will say that I think that line is thin between twisted and insane or mad, but I can see where you land on that side of things here.
Yeah, I'm having a hard time figuring out exactly how to word the distinction, But I don't think his mind is altered at all. I think he's apathetic, and I think he has a very specific view on what needs to get done. But I don't think there's anything illogical going on in his mind when he's making decisions.
Okay. All right. I can dig. I understand.
Mm-hmm. This is not me defending him, by the way.
No, right. I'm not counting any of this as a defense for the record. It's more just an attempt to understand or peel back the way that he's written, the way the character is.
Right.
So I get that. We end this short chapter of wrath surrounding the brothers Valley Wrath with an understanding that Darrow, Severo, and Apple will invade the Gorgon with the army of the Wraths.
Yeah. The army of the Wraths. That's going to be... I'm worried for Darrow.
Yeah. Tell me more. Why are you worried?
Because, first of all, I don't trust him. I don't trust the Wraths at all. I know Apollonius kind of has to be held in check because of his brain implant, but I think he probably has a squirmy way of getting out of that consequence anyway. But Tharsis seemed to be a little bit too submissive for what I understood, and I'm wondering if that's all an act.
That's interesting. So there are two components that I want to mention here. One, talking back to the thing that you're saying with Tharsis. Jesus, I almost said catharsis. Wow, I will speak for the rest of this podcast. So Tharsis is kind of described as soft, though. He's described with like having lost a lot of the muscle and just arms and legs and having a soft punch. And so it feels like he's kind of receded in a way.
It doesn't mention his mental state, though. Like, this is the man that boiled people. This is the man that did horrible things to the point where Apollonius had to deflect and say, no, that was Tharsis.
That's fair. He was just a torturer, though. Yeah, okay. All right. So you're adding suspicion there. I just think it's worth pointing out that it feels as though he's gone a little bit soft since Apollonius has been gone, and on top of that, he was expecting more from the Ash Lord and didn't get anything out of the trade of his brother, basically, for position.
Mm-hmm. I'm with you, and I think that makes sense. I'm ever suspicious of the very intelligent people in this book series.
Like Dido.
Yeah, Dino.
Ditto. The one other thing I wanted to mention here that I actually didn't put in the notes is they do say that no one has had no one has been in front of the Ash Lord for almost 3 years. No one's been able to talk with him. What do you make of that?
Much like Kim Jong-il, he's been dead this whole time, and it's his son that's secretly behind the wheel. Was that ever confirmed, by the way? That, like,
I don't know. I don't think anyone's really figured that out. But
okay,
it feels like that's right.
I think the Ash Lord is rightfully being as cautious as he can about who he lets in. So I'd be surprised if he is in total isolation, but he has his people that he trusts, and
like Atlantia.
And any other communication can be done remotely. Why fuck around with having people on your land if most people want you dead?
You know, I never thought about it that way.
Really?
No, I'm kidding. I definitely have thought about it that way.
Okay, I was gonna say, like,
obviously, it's a good way to keep the spies out is to ensure that no one can fly within 200 kilometers of your island. Like, Jesus, that's intense, especially for how small of a planet Venus is. Like, holy shit, dude.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite a bit. So, chapter 47, Lysander, Teeth and Tears.
Yes.
Lysander, panicking over the state that Cassius is in, demands a trade. Cassius's life for the safe. Dido bends, but Diomedes intervenes, saying that the Olympic surgeons will take... Dido bends, I should say, to his asks and is willing to help Cassius out, but Diomedes intervenes and lets the Olympic surgeons take over instead because he trusts them and doesn't trust necessarily what his mom is doing, which makes a lot of sense given their inter-character conflict. Yeah. What did you make of Lysander's decision here to open the safe?
I mean, everything that was important as far as we understood in the safe has already been revealed, you know? Like as we mentioned before, and I was suspicious of this. I was thinking there was more in there, but the main value of that safe was their true identities. And with both of them already revealed, what is there to hide? And I think Lysander was also simultaneously pretty curious about what Seraphina had hidden inside of his razor hilt.
Yeah, I mean, of course, there's an assumption that Seraphina knew what was in the razor hilt the whole time, right? It's not so much that Lysander hid it away.
No. What Seraphina hid in the hilt, the hollow vid thing.
Correct. So who are you saying was curious? I thought you were saying that Seraphina didn't know what she hid, and I was like...
Lysander was curious about what Seraphina hid in his hilt.
Okay, got it. Lysander was curious. I heard it, and I was like, Seraphina knew what she put into the hilt?
I may have misspoke. I apologize if I did.
It's okay. We're drinking. It's the way the podcast goes. Yeah, I mean, there's an obvious curiosity there, and Lysander also needs to verify his identity, otherwise he's going to get in trouble, right?
That too.
By get in trouble, I mean like probably getting murdered for claiming that he's a loon.
He also has to worry about getting murdered if he is proven to be who he says he is. So
correct. Which Diomedes immediately recognizes too, which is fantastic. Diomedes clearly being an ally to Lysander off the bat, and also being just generally a pretty honorable guy.
I mean, he's an Olympic knight, right? That's what the Rim seems to be a lot more steeped in tradition, even though Dido doesn't seem to give any sort of shit about the fact that they're like guests.
Traditionalists, yeah. Very, very true. Man, it's an interesting thing, of course. Here, when the safe opens, everything shifts pretty dramatically. Dido gives a speech to the Moon Lords, making her case for why she had to do what she did and what she's done, sending her daughter out past the Paxilium line, and how both her and Romulus should stand trial for what has gone on here, and have this Olympic trial kind of determine who's in right and who's in wrong. She gets the go-ahead from the head Olympic Knight, Helios, to continue with her story, of course. And we discover, for the first time, that Darrow didn't just destroy a shipyard with hundreds of thousands of low colors on it, but he also inadvertently, that shipyard fell on New Troy and killed 10 million people when the docks fell to the planet. A substantial number.
That's a whole lot of people.
Darrow's responsible for his soldiers' deaths. He's responsible for war deaths. But this is like a civilian war crime, by all accounts.
Yeah. Yep. Maybe he was hoping Do you think he knew? Do you think he knew that would happen?
No, but just because you don't know doesn't mean shouldn't be held in account.
I mean, it's like 10 million counts of manslaughter at best, right?
I think once you pass like 10, you enter into a weird category where it's like, that's a lot, dude. I don't think you call it manslaughter at that point.
All right, so we've got murder to manslaughter. What is the manslaughter version of genocide?
Oh no. My brain just wanted to say like a man-o-cide, but I hate that. Like, anyway, we're gonna let that one lie right where it is.
Fair enough.
It is a terrible realization what Darrow has done, and only a handful of people, of course, know now. More know now that this will continue to spread through the Rim, of course.
Cat's out of the bag on that one.
Right. What do you think will happen? This actually isn't even a question here. What do you think will happen when it gets to the Republic?
Oh, he better be happy that he's already on the run. Like, he is, he's kind of fucked.
Yeah.
Kind of fucked, I think.
Right. I mean, like, Dancer's aware of the actions already, we know from the beginning of this book, right? He's aware of what happened at Ganymede. And so, while he's definitely fucked, it's only going to be worse when the mob comes after him versus the individuals who can parse out reasoning.
Yeah. Dancer already knows what happened at Ganymede, but he doesn't really know what happened at Ganymede, given this new information. Like, do you think there is any forgiveness on the part of Dancer towards Darrow?
I think Dancer has the capability of forgiving Darrow personally, but I think from a governmental society perspective, he is unable to because he represents so many people. So I think that while he personally can, he also needs to hold him in account for the impact that he makes on so many people's lives.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a tough line to delineate, but it's an important one, I think.
Mm-hmm.
This war crime's a big deal. I mean, all told, to me, at the very least, in my head, it's like, I have a hard time, like, love Darrow, but from this moment when it's revealed that he killed this many people from this one action at the end of Morningstar, it kind of colors that book a little bit differently for me, which is also why, like, during those episodes, I without saying it, I also wanted to speak my case about why it was such a big deal when we were talking with Howler Pod about this, because it's striking. Anyway.
Yeah. I'm excited to reapproach any sort of conversation with the Howler Pod people after I'm done with all this, because I think we could have a lot more real fun conversations that I know they had to kind of hold their tongue last time.
Yeah, definitely. I think it will be a good time on their return episode, so that'll be fun.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be good. So there's something here that I want to bring up as well. Dido cites a white in the Ophion Guild who passes the information on to her about the existence of this teardrop, of this existence of this holotear, and this knowledge and information where it needs to be received. The only other information about the Ophion Guild that we have is that earlier, Oslo was defined as a member. He was the arbiter for Ephraim. He was the one who was giving him the money and paying it out at the beginning of this book. What do you make of the Ophion Guild and their kind of connection here? We know that Oslo is also a member of the relaying information intentionally to the Syndicate. Ephraim, later in this chapter, even is saying, don't use the Ophion Guild. They're connected with the Syndicate. What do you think that means for the larger situation regarding the Rim's involvement in the war? And who do you think is pulling these strings?
I mean, I hadn't really made the connection at all. Hadn't crossed my mind in the slightest. Didn't understand that there was a connection. Still don't quite understand what the Ophion Guild does, but that's neither here nor there. I think
they're like, the whites are lawyers for the most part. They're like religious plus lawyers.
Okay. Gotcha. And it is a specific guild of lawyers then?
Yes.
Okay.
Because we know of the Ophion and the Amani as two examples.
Yes. But clearly it makes some implications of the Syndicate working with the Rim. And it gives me a little bit of a strange idea of what's going on. And is Dido the queen?
Is Dido the queen? That's interesting.
She seems like the kind of person that would grab at power like that.
Okay.
I don't know. And work through the whites.
That's an interesting supposition. I'm going to move on. Okay. Because...
Yeah, no, that's fair.
I both have no more information and want to make no further comment. So... but it is an interesting thing to ponder and think about, especially in relation to the queen. That makes the most sense, so it's good that you brought that up. Then we see something from a different perspective that we witnessed before, but no one in this room knows: the destruction of the dockyards of Ganymede at the hands of the Reaper. Lysander thinks something particularly poignant that I wanted to met out as well with between the two of us. As the destruction reigns, the Reaper turns from the viewport, his face a death mask of grief and pain, and I feel as if I hear his heartbeat across the years, across the space, and know how far he's come from the man he wanted to be. He reminds me of my godfather.
Yep, that's pretty chilling. I think it's also important to note, this is the space in the book where Lysander talks about how Darrow, it was almost impressive that Darrow had gotten this far by the age of 23, right? Something like that. I think that's in the same passage. Am I wrong?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Totally.
Okay. So there's this air of admiration from Lysander towards Darrow and his accomplishments, even though he doesn't necessarily agree with what the actions were. But he understands nonetheless how impressive all of it was and how capable Darrow was back then to have achieved all of that. It was, I mean, a cool look from Lysander's perspective, in not necessarily support of, but in awe of Darrow.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also leads Lysander to this conclusion that in order to protect mankind, Darrow has to die. And this becomes his new mission now.
Yeah. Yeah. It is.
It's no longer revenge, you know?
Yeah, but it's also revenge. It's no longer strictly revenge.
Revenge is a bonus, but yes.
Bonus revenge.
Bonus revenge.
Given what Lysander has seen and what he's currently seeing and everything that he knows about Darrow, like, it's a pretty easy conclusion to come to that he must die. But for us, at least, having him solidify that is a pretty big, significant moment. Like, he had never explicitly said that he had to kill Darrow until now. He always kind of spoke vaguely, I guess, and said that something had to be done.
Yeah, he was very vague about it, and that's why I think that it's so important to clarify that he thinks about it as kind of protecting mankind, protecting the future. Darrow has to die. And that's why I think that it's a little bit more than revenge at that point. And like you said, it's something that he's been mulling around with. He's been trying to figure out how to undo what the Reaper's done. He finally comes to this conclusion now.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely gotta watch your back, Darrow. He's coming for you.
He's gonna fuck you up, dude. To end the chapter, we find out in a resounding thunder that the Rim agrees. The Paxilium is broken and that the Rim is going to war, as they all shout and raise their razors after the Olympic Knights do so. I find it interesting that Diomedes only raises his a little bit, and he's not into this idea. That's worth a little bit of a note. Any other thoughts?
I mean, there's the point right at the end of the chapter where Seraphina seems to be declaring war directly to Lysander. So that's concerning, I think, a little bit.
It is interesting because they're both kind of... Well, Seraphina isn't like an heir apparent or anything like that. She's not next in the line to be sovereign. And I'm sure the Rim Lords would actually probably elect someone as opposed to just handing down the crown.
You mean like what's supposed to happen?
Correct. But in that vein, right, who would have thought? Ridiculous. In that vein, though, that war that she's declaring feels as though it's one still that is against the idea of the core leading things. You know, like she's declaring that privately in a way in which that their views are still kind of in countenance of each other, or at least she thinks they are, because she doesn't really know who Lysander is, who or what he wants to represent as far as it goes from the core.
Yeah.
Did you make anything of Diomedes half raising his razor?
I mean, he's been at odds with his mother's actions the entire time, so I think it makes sense. He's a little obstinate towards declaring war and ending a peacetime agreement. Like, that's a little bit of a dramatic change to be done in an afternoon. So
true. Yeah. But don't all revolutions happen in an afternoon, PJ?
I think explicitly they don't. I think very clearly they take longer than that.
Right. Maybe Maybe. With that, we move into chapter 48, which is another Lysander chapter titled The Boy and the Knight. Of course, our boy and knight are Lysander and Cassius here. Or you could actually maybe flip that around, depending on the way that you think about these two characters throughout this moment. Because Lysander's very smart for who he is, right? Very intelligent at a young age.
Yeah, but he's not a knight.
No, but he kind of is now. I mean, he's not literally the knight, but
I think Cassius is the only one you can really call a knight between the two of them.
Fine. We won't refer to Lysander as a knight. It's fine. He doesn't deserve it anyway. Lysander's chapters, though, in general, are met with kind of a consistent refrain, I think, one that's repeated here with Diomedes at the end of the first page and to the second page. Speaking about Cassius, he says, "But if he dies, you'll be free of him. Then what will you be bound to, Lunan?" And what do you see for Lysander here? What choice is he going to make now that he has this kind of freedom, this burden is lifted off of his shoulder from his liberation from Cassius and all of the other different things that he thought were holding him back in the past?
I mean, based on the entire book so far, if he hadn't been kind of tied to he and Cassius's kind of outlaw lifestyle, it seems like he would have taken action against Darrow. Mm-hmm. And now he kind of has that opportunity. So I think that's the path he'll probably make his way down now that he doesn't have anything holding him back from it.
Totally. There's absolutely nothing holding him back or in his way anymore. And so he is able to pursue kind of with a freedom that he didn't have. Like I said, kind of the lifting of the burden, lifting of the weights. Do you think that this is going to change him?
Slightly. I think we have seen kind of an internal Lysander through this whole thing that was a little bit at odds with Cassius, but hadn't really voiced any opinions on it very, very much. And I don't think we'll so much see the secret internal monologue as much as actual action that follows it. Okay. All right.
Our next scene is one of internal reflection. One that begins with Lysander walking. It's just perfect.
He doesn't know Cassius is dead yet.
Correct. But it is a scene of internal reflection where Lysander is walking his way mentally through the Willow Way, which I think is interesting in its own right, where obviously he's been kind of acquiring the Willow Way through Cassius. But it's a moment from Lysander's youth with Cassius, meeting him when he was much younger, before Darrow was revealed and was known only as Andromedus. It's an excellent section and one that reflects the time after the Institute, but before the Triumph. What'd you make of this whole kind of inserted scene that we get here from Lysander's perspective?
So, first of all, it was kind of nice to see Lysander as a young boy again, because it's really impressive to see, first of all, his intelligence just shining through as a child. He's 10 years old and smarter than I am, but also being able to see the world through Octavia's eyes a little bit again, which kind of gets lost when Octavia has been dead for a decade. It makes you kind of realize that Lysander was almost a wonderkin, and he's still intelligent now. Like, he's still intelligent now, but he's kind of grown out of that. And he's not heralded as the super intelligent person anymore, which seems to kind of have been his personality back then, because that's all anybody talked about.
Wow. So you just actually like opened up something for me. He's like all the kids in high school that were AP kids who amount to nothing.
Like me.
Shut the fuck up. But you know, where like it completely defines someone's personality that they were in advanced classes or what have you. Mm-hmm. And that's an interesting point.
I mean, like, what does he have now? He's still smart, but he's not that much smarter than everyone else.
True. Cassius recants this line to him that I think that is really important. And of course, Lysander is steeped in quotes and musings, I'm sure, especially at 8 years old. Using the claw of others is not brave, nor is it the same as having claws. I would have thought you, of all people, would know that. It's interesting because it comes from a moment where he's kind of threatening back at him, saying like, well, Aja would take care of that, or Aja will take care of you. And I find it a really interesting thing to come from Cassius to Lysander, because one might say that Octavia suffered from that very flaw, which is to say that she herself, so far as we know, wasn't an excellent razor wielder, but was a master manipulator of her own power and political gain. Well, everything else that she's done has been a matter of using her own type of claw, not a physical claw, but otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that Cassius's quote itself might be flawed because it's not taking into consideration having power over people and being able to order them to do things? Or is he advising Lysander in a different way, saying you need to take your own fate in your own hands, kind of a thing?
I mean, I think it's simultaneously neither and both, if that makes sense. I think what he's explicitly referring to is Lysander calling out, or saying that he'll basically just call Aja in here to take care of it for him. And this is... I don't think that anyone would argue that Octavia didn't have claws because she didn't fight physically on her own. And I don't think Cassius believed that either. I think he understood and probably at least respected the strength that Octavia had and wielded. Whether or not he agreed with it. But
right. I'm not saying that Cassius is saying that about Octavia. I'm saying that extracting that from the quote, we can kind of apply it to Octavia. But
I don't think we can. I think it's simply Lysander was a little bit sheltered in actual confrontation.
And was actually used to having other people fight his fights for him.
Exactly. And this is a quote that is great for really anybody to hear. But specifically, Lysander seems to have grown from that and has held on to the quote clearly because he's thinking about it more than a decade later, and obviously knows how to fight his own battles now. So, and going beyond that, fights other people's battles for them sometimes to their own detriment or what have you. Like when he jumps into the fighting ring to save Cassius's life, which, obviously he didn't, but like Lysander has clearly been shaped by this quote.
Yeah, it definitely has. It is one that's very interesting because there is sort of that reliance that he has on Aja here. And actually, one of the things that shocks me, reading back on a lot of the Lysander sections, especially in this book, is his love and reliance upon Aja kind of as a mother. What did you make of that as it comes here?
I think it makes sense. He's an 8-year-old kid. Is his mother even alive at this point?
No, his mother's dead.
Octavia is super fucking busy running the entire solar system. And Aja is basically tasked with taking care of him. So
I guess my question here more is from the perspective of knowing what we know about Aja. Imagining her as a mother or as someone that's even comforting, is so different than the Aja that we know and we've seen from the original trilogy.
He never says she's comforting, though.
He does at the end of this, saying that when he was crying, she would hold him, and has consistently kind of refrained about her being like a motherly figure.
Good point. Yeah, that'd be a fucked up mother figure. I don't know how else to describe it. That'd be pretty fucked up to have Aja as a mom.
Yeah, it's certainly not great. And then we're woken up from our dream here with Cassius and Lysander, and Mustang, of course, is here and has a nice, good bit part inside of this where she's being friendly, and we can kind of see a youthful Mustang unattached to Darrow and kind of the way that she is. We move on from that, though, and he's woken from that dream by Ore, a pink, who confirms that Cassius Albolona, the last of the Bolognas, is dead. And so it's time for our in memoriam for Cassius. So
a toast to the eagle, who probably should have died like a dozen times before this.
Son of a bitch. You son of a bitch. All right, drinking for that. The end of this chapter with Lysander comparing the loss of his parents to the loss of his father-like mentor is an incredibly powerful moment here that's shared with us. Again, it's another internal moment. Like you said, hopefully Lysander comes out, makes more external. But the life of the man must begin line rings out as change now must occur for Lysander. What do you make of this new change that Lysander sees growing from a child to a man?
He is being thrown into it, and regardless of if he was ever prepared for it or if he ever expected it, this is huge. It is a giant change, and it'll take him a little bit of time to kind of settle into himself, into who he is as a solo man. You know, he is Chewie taking the reins of Han.
Rip Han. Another Ben favorite. Dead. Ben likes dead heroes. Got it now. That's his archetype. Anyway, we'll move in to chapter 49, Lyria, Enemy of the State. These two chapters back to back are, I think, some of the most interesting in the book to me in their own right, where we get to see some of the other characters from kind of a third party's perspective. We get to kind of know these characters as they really are and sort of their morals and their lines as they exist and whether or not they're willing to cross them. I find that fascinating. And Lyria is the only vessel really that we have, maybe Ephraim, who can be used to kind of cross those lines.
What's the question?
Well, I was looking for a nod, mostly.
I mean, yeah.
Cool. All right. Lyria is not having a good time.
No. When is she having a good time? Ever.
Like never. She's like never having a good time.
I think you started basically every single Lyria section in the past few weeks with that exact same line. I don't know if it was intentional or not. I'm guessing
I've tried to intentionally start every Lyria episode with the same kind of general framing or idea, and it's whether or not she's having a good time.
Is she ever having
a couple of weeks ago?
She hasn't.
She was having a good time with Philippe. You know,
that's
where
true.
It's like, dear diary, I had the best time and I think that was like episode 5 or 4 or something like that, where I had that written in right there.
Even then, she was like embarrassed to the point of not buying a train ticket. So, you know.
Correct. Yeah. She got frustrated by the subway lines, which I totally understand.
And spent, 2 days' pay on a coffee.
Correct. Yeah. Welcome to New York. I mean, Hyperion.
Exactly.
So the Telemanus' interrogation of Lyria is an intense one that her life, of course, depends on. It's hanging in the balance here. We find that Cavax is alive, as we drank for at the beginning, but barely. We know how that went last time, though, with the barely alive person. We literally just got done talking about him, so Don't count your eggs, PJ.
Hey, it was for this week.
Or don't count your jelly beans.
I ate all my jelly beans, Crossland. I never count my jelly beans. They taste better when you just shove them into your mouth.
But Niobe and Daxo are fierce and intelligent in these moments, picking apart the story and seeing the political consequences that belie them.
Mm-hmm. They're fierce and intelligent, yes, but they don't seem to have the nuance of dealing with fragile low colors. They're so used to dealing with people who are used to these like confrontational interrogation situations, like reds, like golds in general, that like just confront each other like this, and they get really nowhere but just terrifying Lyria. And that's maybe an effective way of making sure that she tells the truth, but it's not efficient, and it's not really helpful. So it's kind of cool to see that shortcoming of their tactic. Like, yes, this would probably work with a gold warlord, but this is just some timid, fragile red girl, and your good cop, bad cop tactics are just terrifying her.
Yeah, especially with Niobe. I mean, Niobe is attempting to be the good cop here, which is why when Theodora steps in, it becomes very different.
I thought Theodora was being bad cop.
Theodora is being good cop.
Or Niobe. You said Niobe's being good cop.
Better than Daxo.
So it's bad cop, good cop, better cop?
I would argue bad cop, badder cop, good cop. If you understand.
Either way, it's not working.
Correct. To speak to your point, especially about what you addressed right at the beginning, fierce and intelligent, but not so wise, they're compromised by anger right now. Like they're not making the best decisions, of course, because they are very angry about what's happened to Cavax as well as what's happened with the abduction of Pax and otherwise. So they're not making the best decisions. Totally agree with you. And of course, she's not open or receptive to those things, which is why when Theodora comes in, or the good cop routine comes in, it's really clever. I think that it's also interesting to mentally compare her, the spy master, of course, of Mustang that we figure out a bit later, against that of the Duke of Hands. What do you make of those comparisons and the trio of interrogators that we have here?
I mean, they're both roses, right? Like,
yeah. Right.
So, and we know earlier from, I think, this book, maybe the previous book, that the pinks were used in wartime sometimes as like human lie detectors. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of cool to see Theodora and the Duke of Hands both used for the same reason in two very different settings. Find truth and press for answers. And one's in more of a torture role and one's more of an like interrogation role. But they are effectively acting the same part, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's so interesting, especially when you compare those two as parallels like you've done. It's so well put, by the way. And something that I hadn't considered is we actually get to compare these two on opposite sides of the coin, really. Great point about the human lie detectors and bring them in and actually having them be that. It's interesting to see when the switch flips in Theodora, right? It's a whole moment when she starts to instead implant assumptions into Lyria as opposed to actually listening and sort of trying to extract information. She's instead kind of presuming the next piece, which feels wrong in a way.
It is. They have so much evidence against her at this point. It's hard to entertain any other ideas, especially with emotions running so high and the evidence mounting against Lyria. It's hard to put that aside and really seek truth. So the fact that they do it at all is kind of impressive.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. I think what's really interesting here, too, to speak about the perspectives and sort of their implanting, Daxo's recount of what the Ash Lord could do with a red and putting him into a camp and planning all this shit is almost as paranoid as you are about Dido and the rationing.
Is it paranoia if it's true?
Well... You giving me the shakes of like I don't know how to answer that one, PJ, because it starts as paranoia, and then if it does become true, that's a different question. But
I mean, yes, it's still paranoia, even if you're right. But yeah, I get it.
Just trying to make a point. So. As we've already spoken about, between Daxo and Theodora, they've all kind of got their own assumptions, be it the Society or the Red Hand, both incorrect. It's so interesting to see both of them try to twist the narrative to get out this information that she isn't capable of knowing because she doesn't actually have it, or can't actually give anything new because she doesn't have any additional information. Makes you kind of think about other forms of interrogation, and I want to mention something that we have both watched a lot of and a lot of our friends really enjoy, which is Jim Can't Swim. You want to talk about Jim Can't Swim for a bit?
Dude, I have been watching so much Jim Can't Swim lately because, all right, I'll get into it in a little bit, but Caitlin hasn't seen any of it, so I've been watching it with her, and she's falling in love with it too. But Jim Can't Swim, for anybody who's not aware, is a criminology and psychology YouTube channel, and they break down police interrogation videos that are in the public record. So they break it down. They obviously have the hindsight of the guilt or innocence of the person being interrogated, and they're able to really kind of go through and break down the most granular things, like as far as placement of the chairs between the suspect and the interrogator, and just tons of shit. It's super in depth. It's super, super, super cool. And if you haven't ever seen it, check out Jim Can't Swim on YouTube. I used to be subscribed to their Patreon for a long time, even after they announced that they would no longer be adding things to the Patreon because of a change in something that YouTube did. I don't remember exactly what it was. But even after that, I'm like, all right, it's $1 a month. I'll still support them. But they do some real in-depth, real cool videos. I love it. But that, because I've been watching it all, like, I watched an episode today at lunch. I've been watching it very regularly, so to see you put that in the notes was really funny. But that's exactly what I was thinking about during this scene in the book.
Yeah, that's why I specifically brought it up and originally put in the notes, is because I was like, this is actually very much something that we've steeped ourselves in our own right, in a very amateur way.
Yeah.
The degree of interest. So it's interesting to see, and would highly recommend their channel to anyone and everyone else. Mm-hmm. This is Crossland PJ's Recommends show. Given that, Daxo then moves to retrieve an oracle from the aquarium and affixes it to her arm. It isn't attached before long before Virginia actually walks in. She also points out something, that she knows that it was him that she knows that it was Theodora that broke into Deepgrave, that it was her that helped Darrow.
Yeah. Which
make it through. I didn't arrange my pronouns there right. You understand what I mean.
I understood what you meant, but the way you had it written, I was like,
the way I had it written was actually correct, and I just tried to correct myself. So she also points out something. Yes, Mustang did know. That's my point. So she pointed out something. I thought the
point was that
she knows that it was
Theodora knew.
Darrow. Yes, Theodora did know. So she also points out something, that she, Mustang, knows that it was Darrow that broke into Deepgrave, and that it was Theodora that helped. Just replace the pronouns with the proper nouns, and the sentence makes sense.
Okay. Now I got it. Now I understand.
Yep.
The way you had it written, I thought you meant that Mustang helped Darrow break into Deepgrave.
No, Theodora.
Okay. Yes. All right, we're back on track. We both understand where we're coming from. So, something that I'm curious to hear your thoughts on. Lyria has the oracle kind of like sucking on her a little bit before it gets murdered by Mustang. I think Lyria would have pressed for letting it stay on if she understood what it was, because it's more tangible proof that she's telling the truth. And that's the one thing that she's constantly worried about in here, is that they won't believe her when she says anything. But she hasn't lied in the slightest.
No, which is also, I agree with you. I think that it is strange, because I think that if she did know what the oracle was, she would be okay with it, because she doesn't have a problem. But instead,
not even just okay with it, I think she would have pressed to let it continue.
Yeah, I think that she's actively just terrified of it, though, because she doesn't know what it is, and like she's having this crazy scorpion tentacle-y thing growing into her arm and sucking her blood so as to understand her truth. And, like, that's terrifying. And so she doesn't really know what's about to happen, or the torture that she might endure, or the pain. And so it's strange to her. But I think that it's also... It's interesting evidence for Mustang, of course, too, where this thing kind of still exists that was supposed to be removed. And Mustang obviously understands what it is. But I agree with you. I think that if Illyria had a full understanding of what an oracle is, she'd be like, fine, fucking test me. Sign me up for that lie detector. I don't give a shit. That would be Illyria's exact word-for-word answer.
Mm-hmm. And it's spliced partially from a pit viper, right?
Correct. Yep.
So she has some kinship with it. It was interesting that wasn't mentioned here.
Yeah, I think she's too panicky to really see it.
But it wasn't even described as pit viper-like. It was described. I don't think the description really matches what we got before.
Well, it was like a spider, a scorpion, and with pit viper venom, something.
I'd have to look at it again. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But
if I remember, this is meant to more explain the part that actually like interfaces with body, more or less, is the way that it's intentionally described. The thing, as we even talked about in our episode in the time at Golden Sun, is a disaster to imagine because there's so much going on.
Yeah.
Where it's just like it can be whatever creepy concoction of centipede, roach, scorpion, lizard, viper, snake that you want it to be, almost. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So before demanding that Mustang speak with Lyria alone, she says, I tire of being treated like a child by my own council because I have chosen to obey the laws. You're no different than Victra. You mistake my morality for naivete. To a certain extent, obviously all of these folks around her fall into that as she addresses them directly, not actually treating her like the leader that she is, and instead treating her like just the person that they knew. And it's interesting because it's almost like they think that they'll get a pass like they might have in the previous society versus the Republic as it stands. And Mustang is maybe the only truly moral person that we know. Maybe Cavax. I mean, some other people maybe fit this, but at the very least in a severe position of power. The quote, though, also applies to Darrow, doesn't it?
Certainly. Absolutely. But at the same time, Darrow doesn't necessarily... He knows enough to hide his actions because he understands that Mustang has to be the sovereign and has to call him out on things that he does wrong. So, at the very least, he tries to hide his wrongdoings a little bit. But at that, there's really no one who wholeheartedly follows the law that they've set up. Even Dancer, he goes behind the back of the Republic and brings in Julia Albalona when that's not his jurisdiction. That's not something he should be doing, but he believes that it's the right thing to do. But Mustang's the only one that's actually following the laws, and it's really kind of funny to think about it that way.
It's stupid. I just feel so angry for her. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
It's so frustrating that she is consistently this moral person who actually stands for what the Republic stands for, and everyone else is kind of just skating by, breaking rule by rule as though it's casual, and she's kind of letting them get away with it because they're family or they're close friends. And man, I'd be so angry if I were her.
Yeah. I mean, what can you do here?
What can you do here and what can you do in general are two different questions. Which,
okay, what can you do in that scenario? Not here specifically within the book, but here as in that mindset of Mustang, understanding that like nobody's really taking this seriously like she is.
I think that becomes then a point of making an example of people feels like the wrong way to say this, but at the same time, like if you break the law, you break the law. Treat everyone equally under the law.
I mean, she tried to do that with Darrow, and he killed the leader of her, like her guard. So,
well, yeah, but you continue to try to apply it evenly, and maybe you get better cards.
Who's better than Darrow?
I'm just kidding.
Who could best him? Apollonius, maybe?
Lysander, of course.
Lysander, of course. Yes, there we go.
I'm just kidding. I mean, maybe Diomedes. Who knows? Atlas? Romulus?
I have a feeling those aren't going to be the answer.
Well, I'm just spitting shit at you at this point. Tharsis?
Tharsis, there we go.
The Ash
It'll be
Lord?
Tharsis.
Atalantia?
Ah.
Julia Albolona? Wow!
Who would have thought?
Curveball. Crazy razor wielder.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a whole thing. I feel Virginia. I feel Mustang here. It sucks.
Yeah, it does.
So with that, we move into chapter 50, which is another Lyria chapter. Of course, it complements this other one. It's called Lyria Mother, of course. And we're talking now to Mustang, kind of one-on-one. Holiday's still in the room, of course, but it's mostly meant to be a one-on-one conversation. Less, I mean, it's still an interrogation for information, but it's less of an interrogation, right?
Right.
It's meant to be more of an honest Aristotelian conversation based in pathos, logos, and ethos. So Lyria makes a compelling confession as to why she came back, to ensure that Liam would grow up with a real role model to disprove the lies that are said about both Reds and the Gammas alike. I think it's a very strong and compelling argument, and one that obviously sways Virginia as she realizes that she's not bullshitting about what's going on. After Lyria kind of spitballs two brief but not complete answers, these last two chapters are total heartstring chapters. And for me, Lyria's confession here is deep, heartfelt, and hard to chew through, especially when we look at Ephraim's chapter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's not only convincing, but it's also definitely true. Like, Lyria has proven time and time and time again that Liam is her motivation for a whole lot of self-preservation things. Like, her reason for existing is making sure Liam doesn't live a shit life going forward. So it's a good point, and it's a convincing point, but it's also a perfectly true point that she makes. Yeah.
It's also, like, sadly tragic. How do you think Lyria would be without Liam? Without that, like, need to be a role model? Do you think that she would give in to a lot of these things?
I think she would have given up a long time ago. I don't think she would have fought to live. Man,
it sucks. It sucks to say that about, like, a main character. But I don't disagree with you.
No, I don't think without Liam, I don't think she would have run to try to flag down Kavix.
It's an especially apt comparison when you think about her to Ephraim, right? When you think about the fact that Ephraim really doesn't have anyone to consider, or actually he does have people that he should be thinking about this way, but he has not actively thought about them this way. If you take the two of them, and I didn't put this in the later notes, but it's something we'll definitely talk about when we get there. But Ephraim's Liam for the most part is Volga, but he doesn't recognize that he actually has a Liam until it's too late, till he's made the mistakes. Meanwhile, Lyria obviously has Liam and stands by him and understands and is able to ingest that because she's in tune with kind of her feelings in that way. Makes the two of them an interesting dichotomy when thinking about characters and the way that they deal with grief.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, because I think who their Liam is, to put it in your terms, requires them to be cared about and to be the focus of their feelings. So I think Volga could be Ephraim's Liam, but she's not, because he doesn't think of it that way.
Correct. Should be his Liam.
I'm with you.
By all intents. And especially by the end, well, by like the midpoint of chapter 51, which I think should be 2 chapters. But by the midpoint of chapter 51, that feels established when she leaves, that he finally comes to this realization when she doesn't show up and whatnot. We'll talk about that in a bit. Let's get back to the interrogation. The Sovereign's interrogation here is far more calm, of course. Like we said, it's a conversation, and there's so much like great technology involved, especially as Harmony comes in, and we're seeing like the holocams fly around and the different visualizations of the marketplace, the blight burn or the blighter that Ephraim is wearing to hide his face in the restaurant and everywhere else. It's great.
It's like those anti-paparazzi jackets.
Yeah.
Like, have you seen those at all?
No.
So it's this specific, like, reflective material that looks just kind of like a white and black patterned jacket, but if you hit it with flash, it just obscures it's so reflective that it obscures the entire picture. So they make like hoodies out of it that people can wear. So like celebrities wear them to not actually get any good paparazzi pictures of them, because it just
really smart.
obscures the entire photo if it's taken with a flash.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Yeah. So it's like that, but more of a digital thing.
Okay. All right. That's really interesting. Interesting to take that tech and extrapolate it out to, or move it backwards to where we are right now. Mm-hmm. Also, the lion in the photo is just icing on top of the fucking cake.
Yeah, that was some cold ass like serial killer shit from Ephraim. Like obviously done mockingly, but
he knows exactly what he's doing.
He knows exactly what he's doing. There were so many lines of defense and so many layers of protection for him. Do you think he ever expected to be found out? Or do you think that was just him fucking with them? Because ideally those credit card transactions never get found anyway. Right?
Right. I think it was him fucking with them. I don't think that he wants to be found out. And also those credit card transactions weren't traced back to him because it was a prepaid debit card effectively with a limited balance on it. But I think that he was doing that intentionally. Like the line was intentionally that he knew that this was going to be reviewed at a certain point so as to not throw off the scent, but recognize that he knew that he was going to be tracked.
Yeah, you're right.
It's tough though. I mean, fuck. It's so interesting to see the like reverse forensics of a heist, right? Like super cool visualization.
Yeah, super fucking cool.
And then of course, Virginia puts it together. The syndicate is the one who's abducted her son. Neither of the two parties that Niobe or Daxo were chasing down or Theodora. She gives a brief backstory on the syndicate as a whole and explains the rise of the queen of the syndicate after their internal civil war. What did you make of this? I think that it's a fairly interesting tidbit that kind of fills in the point from Golden Sun when we first hear of the syndicate to now.
Did we already know that the syndicate's logo was an octopus?
I don't think so. I think that was this book.
Okay. For some reason, I remember something about that, but it could be just me making shit up.
Then, at the end of this chapter here, they finally nab the connection, their lead. It's the omnivore that Lyria speaks about, something that no one else was able to get out of her, which, of course, was owned by the Piraeus Insurance Company, registered in 741 PCE, Ephraim T. Horn. He done fucked up.
Yeah. You mentioned that nobody was able to get that out of her before, and she just assumed they had it.
Mm-hmm.
Like it wasn't like she was hiding that information. She just, on a whim, decided to mention it. Like, yeah, you could probably find the fingerprints, assuming they already had it. So that was fortunate of her to mention.
Yeah. Right. I guess my point is the only reason that she might have even felt forthcoming is because she felt like she was a part of something. She was trying to solve the problem as opposed to being, tortured, interrogated. Yeah.
Yep. You're right. Good point.
You're more forthcoming when you're let in that way. But yeah, it's the omnivore and the whole like, well, yeah, I know him. He's my brother-in-law.
I mean, this does prove like Ephraim should have killed her.
Yeah, he tried, as he recants.
Yep.
Again. Fuck. All right, so chapter 51, our last chapter of the week, Skyhook. Ephraim T. some fuck. I can't actually remember. Why can't I remember his
Horn.
name? It's not gonna remember. Horn. Wow, I literally just said it. Why did I fuck that up? Ephraim T. Horn. So Ephraim's reflection here, his job well done feels earned in a way when he's kind of looking out over the skyline with the dawn cresting from his hotel room, his cozy penthouse. It's so strange to flip from these perspectives, one of Lyria, the person robbed, to the villain, right next to each other. It feels almost like the end of the movie end of a movie or the start of the end of a movie.
Yeah. I'm curious if these feelings are genuine or if it's like his disposition is entirely born out of Zolidone use and the sort of side effects of prolonged usage. If that makes sense. Like, I'd be curious to see what he would actually be like without any Zolidone.
Yeah, as though he had quit cold turkey and was clean and stuff.
As if it had never existed. Because we still don't necessarily know if there's long-lasting, like, effects of, like, prolonged usage.
Sure, yeah.
So knowing that even if he's not actively under the effects of it right now, it still could be fucking with his mood and his feelings. That's
true. But I think that there's also something that feels like it has a finality to it in this moment where he's like, he actually has, per what you were talking about last episode, he is kind of treating this like his last job, like he's done, and he's ready to go on vacation, hang out with Volga, go see the sights, like he's very much trying to retire.
So why be cold about everything then?
Well, because he's a cold asshole.
Yeah.
He's still, he hasn't changed despite his like mood going into retirement. I think maybe if he were able to go into retirement, he might change his tune a little bit, but
that's fair. Good point.
A little bit.
Good point.
His reflections, of course, as you've already pointed out, are dark and pained, even wrapped up in the logic of the Zolidone. They still have this kind of tinge of pain that he's trying to bury by chewing on these pills as often as he can. He's obviously messed up. He's killed some of his close compatriots and friends, and he only has a single friend in Volga. And
interesting
quotes.
To see her as a friend after constantly, explicitly saying that they're not friends.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's terrible the way that he's treated her this whole time, and now he's like, I'm at the end, I'm done. Now we can be friends, maybe, or that we are friends, even.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the truth. I think he truly does see them as friends, but he was so often pushing against it as a means of not... Because they work so closely together in a very, very lethal environment, I think it made the most sense to try to make sure that they didn't see each other as friends, even though he probably did see her as a friendly face and as basically the closest person in his life. So
yeah, I would agree with you, and I'd say that some of that is him protecting her
and himself emotionally.
Insulating himself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This section actually is just it's a tough section to peel apart because there's so much to the Ephraim Volga relationship as it's exposed over this entire section. At the beginning, we get this kind of moment of like a breakup of sorts of their friendship and sort of a dissolution. And in the middle, we have Ephraim being hopeful that despite the argument, they'll come back together. And at the end, Ephraim is willing to sacrifice anything to ensure that Volga is safe and allowed to live a life that she deserves. And that makes for a complicated narrative for him.
Yeah. I mean, nothing about Ephraim's life right now is simple. Everything is complicated. And it has to be, for better or for worse. Even though all he wants is for it to be simple now.
Right. Do you make anything of the news stories that are on the TV, of course, that we're hearing over the course of this? Did they pose any questions for you?
I know. What are the? Oh, there's the one about the obsidians going missing, right?
Yep.
I'm curious if they're being abducted or if they're just kind of absconding on their own and just kind of going missing on their own volition. It'll be interesting to see what that's all about because I'm sure it'll come up. Like, this is clearly a sort of foreshadowing Easter egg kind of deal. But
also the Reaper was spotted on Mars, so
he's not on Mars though.
Right. That can't be true.
Huh. I didn't catch that one. Interesting. Unless the timeline is fucky.
I can promise you that the timeline is not fucky.
Okay.
I'll sort that out for you.
There's two Darrows.
Darrow has managed to clone himself.
Hey, worse has happened.
No, I guess I guess my point here is more to point to like a semi-anecdotal nature as it relates to news, wherein like, should we even trust these newscasts, especially when Ephraim also makes mention of, there's no mention of the abduction, which was a huge deal, of course, if you were around it at all, or if you saw anything. There were a number of people that died in the aftermath one way or another. 3 hover bikers were sucked in and killed. It's all just kind of gone completely under the radar.
Yeah.
Without any kind of formal announcement. So it kind of makes you question what the media control looks like. We know that Quicksilver, of course, had a grip hold on media and broadcast, but it's interesting.
The jackal from the grave is controlling the media.
Oh boy, wouldn't that be nasty? How would that even work?
Ghost programming. I don't know. What?
We'll move on. Volga and Ephraim's fight that we've already talked about and struggle is an aggressive intervention, of course, on her part, and honestly one that's been a long time coming for Ephraim. But like, Ephraim is just harsh and fucking cruel when he mocks her about the truth of what was done, about the abduction, and he's just being honest. Like, he's not being more than he's being honest, but Volga is so offended by that honesty and explains why she's done what she's done for Ephraim, that Ephraim is family and everything that she's done is for him because he had her back when she needed it most. It's all just a culmination and explosion of emotions over the course of this book. What would it leave you feeling?
Well, it's kind of overdue, this kind of fallout. But it's certainly sad to see Volga like this. She's loyal to a fault, and it's crazy to think that she's kept that loyalty up as long as she did, even with how much she understands his pushback on her. Like she basically reads it all back. Like, fuck off, Volga, whatever. She understands entirely what's going on in his head, and the fact that she still decides to be loyal and there for him all the time is kind of astonishing. So I think overdue to see this fight happen, but at the same time, like, cool to see Volga respond to and understand all of the slights against her and still be that loyal.
Of course. Especially, it's so tough because after she leaves, the way that Ephraim just kind of coldly rolls over it like it's nothing as their story together ends, so as he describes, it's pain. I
mean, that could also be either active or long-lasting effects of the Zolodone as well. I want to see Ephraim with Trig and see the emotional differences between the two, and then see him after Trig for a while, and then see him after he picks up heavy Zolodone usage, and just see what those differences are and how much has changed and what he would be like without it.
Got it. Yeah. Man, it's tough. So moving on, we'll move into his escape plan away from the penthouse suite. We visit one of the many docks that are outlying inside of the stars. The ship that he is going to be taking is called the Eurydice Wind. The name of the ship, of course, is named after, well, of course, do you know this? Do you not know this? Is the lover of Orpheus. So Eurydice and Orpheus were lovers in Greek mythology. While there's a huge story behind the whole damn thing, it's easy enough to explain that Orpheus is singing a song of mourning for her death when she's bitten by a snake and killed, unfortunately. And I'd like to think that that fits with the theme of Ephraim, that he too is living kind of this mournful life after the loss of Trig, his love. It just feels very fitting that this be his ship to escape back to Earth, where even Ephraim's from.
Yeah.
Or sorry, not Ephraim, but Ephraim, rather Trig is from. Yeah.
It is very fitting, and it's gorgeous. Like, all of these sort of hidden historical literary references being tucked in they're all beautifully done. It's really cool to see.
I'm glad someone appreciates them, PJ. Thank you.
I'm not thinking you. I'm thinking Pierce.
Fuck off. I'm just kidding. Yeah.
You didn't write this fucking book.
No, I didn't. You're right. Good call. I'm sorry. My bad. But would you have gotten it if I didn't say anything?
Absolutely not.
Right. Okay, cool. Well, I'll take that credit and dust off my shoulders real quick. All right, cool. Move on. It is really well done. I like the inclusion here. Of course, it's not fully encompassing of the myth, but I think it's good. It's interesting. Ephraim finally comes to the conclusion that Volga isn't coming and realizes something eerie, that the ship he's on now is empty. In the lounge sits Holiday and the rabbit, Lyria. Ephraim realizes that he's completely fucked, and Holiday, of course, is applying a shit ton of pressure.
Yeah. I think it was interesting to bring Lyria into this scene, because it would have been way easier not to. But I think it's smart, because this way Ephraim really can't talk his way out of it, you know?
No, there's no alibi. There's no like, well, I wasn't there. I don't know what you're talking about, because she can clearly identify him.
You're right. Exactly.
Right.
So just letting her tag along was both strategic and probably cathartic for her. Mm-hmm. Though maybe a little bit terrifying.
Without a doubt. There are a number of incredible quotes here that Ephraim kind of just unleashes over the course of this chapter. But the one that stuck with me this read through for whatever reason is dead kids are the loose change of war. And oh my fucking God, is that the truth?
I mean, yeah, he's not wrong at all. And he backs it up with a ton of just evidence, you know? And it's not said evil or maliciously or anything like that, but he does kind of say it to justify an evil act, so kind of have to take it for what it's worth in that respect.
It's atrocious, especially when you consider the sort of like things that he was saying to Volga the night before. It's just all of it's squirmy. Yeah. Squirmy in its own right. It's clear that he's always manipulating his audience whenever he talks.
Right. Exactly.
Lyria's attempt to reason, at reason, I think here is very noble, correct, and understandable. Not that it, of course, is going to change Ephraim's mind as it relates to his loss of Trig, as we well know, that nothing can change the way that he thinks about it, but Lyria directly compares the two of them and their outlooks, and largely, I think she's right. We've been talking about this, and I mentioned it earlier, of course, for a long time, but now she's really able to come out and say it. We basically have a choice to exist in the pain and misery of the past, or we have the ability to move past it and push through it. Lyria's tried to move forward, and that's why she was able to let that like brief pan flash of happiness into her life with Philippe. Meanwhile, Ephraim has constantly rejected it, like we talked about with Volga, where he consistently tells her to fuck off and other things like that. I think that, if nothing else in this story, that is a moment of absolutely brilliant writing as these two characters parallel themselves, intertwine, and then untwine themselves here at the end, where they end up on kind of opposite sides of the spectrum. And then finally, by a combination of a lack of Zoladone and Lyria's pressure that she's applying by opening up and expressing this kind of honest moment, Ephraim cracks and all of his emotions flood out and he shifts for the first time in the entire story.
I think it's kind of a beautiful way to, and I know there's more to the book, obviously, but it feels like an emotional wrap up on Ephraim, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Like this is kind of the emotional climax for him, even if there's more to it. So it was a good fitting end to that sort of chapter, I guess. And hopefully, I hope it doesn't get broken back open again.
Sure.
But
totally.
Who knows if it will.
I mean, if you think about the way that this book is laid out, we've got a little bit over 100 pages left. If we assume 110, that means we get like 27 pages of character. So not a whole lot of ground left to cover.
No, not a ton.
Even though it's over 2 episodes. It's, yeah.
Yeah.
So the information difference about the Queen, again, is interesting. Do you have any like guesses or thoughts as to who you think the Queen is? We talked about this earlier, but...
God, it's like Ares all over again, man. I think Dido, though.
Okay, so you stand by the Dido idea.
I'm going to stand by the Dido idea.
Okay, all right. We get a brief mention here as well of Victra's maternity armor, and of fucking course she has maternity armor, because Jesus Christ.
Hilarious. God, only Victra would commission something like that. I can't imagine they had it ready to go. Like, she had to get that commissioned, right?
Without a doubt, there's no way. Yeah. Well, maybe. I don't know.
No, there's no way they just had maternity armor. That's not a real thing.
Fair enough. So... with that in mind, the next step, of course, is how can they position Ephraim, make him make a move to help them. And what did they have against Ephraim? Of course, it's Volga. They caught Volga at a zoo, of course, because she views that as her hedonistic trait is that she goes to a zoo. She doesn't go to a bar. She doesn't go to a strip club. She goes to a zoo because she felt sad, and so she went to a zoo to just hang out and enjoy it and like pay a little bit more money because it probably wasn't the afternoon rate. And she's just trying to have a good time, and she gets jailed because she's just trying to deal with her feelings of loss.
That's not why she was jailed. She was jailed because she kidnapped 2 children and sold them to a crime organization.
Well, there is that.
That's why she was jailed.
I thought I was making a good point.
Fair, yes. But no, like, she's perfectly guilty in all of this, but she is mostly being used as leverage for Ephraim. Mm-hmm. Which, is kind of the best she could hope for, right?
Yeah, damn it. Damn it. Ephraim's quote here, too, is especially vital, I think. She followed me like a puppy from the day we met. All she gave me was love. She never asked for it in return. Since she was born, she's been a slave, a monster, kicked down by everyone, and then she found me, and I treated her just the same. I feel sick. And, fuck Ephraim for realizing this so late. Come on, dude. Come on.
I think there's something to be said that Ephraim clearly didn't treat her that well, but he didn't treat anybody well, and he didn't treat her more poorly because of who she was or what she was. And it seemed like Volga at least understood that she wasn't being discriminated against in Ephraim's eyes. She was just another person that he was a dick to. It had nothing to do with the fact that she was a crow.
Fuck. You're right, though. I just want to like tear my heart out and put it out for Volga to eat at this point.
Well, I mean, that is probably her daily meal.
It probably is.
As an obsidian, the beating heart of another living human.
My heart is yours, Volga. And then, of course, to end the chapter, a deal is struck. Ephraim earns him and Volga pardons for rescuing the children if he's able to complete the task. And if he fails, runs, or defects, she, being Mustang, will kill him personally. If she doesn't, the Reaper or Severa will, and he will shit himself in his bed, as they say.
Who do you think would be if you got to choose who hunts you down and kills you? Who do you pick?
I mean, you pick Mustang, but if you're saying I have to pick between, I'm going to add in Victra here. So the Reaper, Severa, or Victra, I'd pick Darrow.
Yeah, Darrow's the least likely to play with his food.
Right, that's exactly my thought. Like, oh no. At the very least, I'm gonna go out decently, I guess. So that's it for this week. Jesus, this was actually a decently long episode, all told. So with that, we've got PJ's predictions.
We do. So first one, does the Duke of Hands already know that Ephraim is compromised? I think yes. I think he's got enough spies around that he and the rest of the syndicate know that he's been approached by Mustang.
Okay, all right. Does Lysander join the Rim War forces?
No, but I think he wants to.
Okay.
I think he mostly chooses not to because he doesn't trust that he'd be kept safe within their ranks, if that makes sense. I think he understands that all of them have bad blood against his family, so he wishes them well and does what he can to fuck off.
Sure. Does Cavax survive? Is your final question for yourself.
Yep, I think he does. He's too much of a beefcake to die.
Oh, beefcake. Oh, poor beefcake. Mm-hmm. All right, so with that, we move into next week. Next week, we'll be reading chapters 52 through 57. This is going to be our penultimate episode of Iron Gold. PJ, we're almost to the last book. The 5th book, not the last book, but you know.
I mean, last book for now.
Right. So, wow. Wild. So that's where we'll leave you for the week.
Thank you, of course, to our producers, Tim and Andrew, for helping us keep our show's lights on. Also, check out all the links in the show notes. You can find our schedule, our Patreon, previous episodes, our websites, our social. It's all in one convenient spot.
We've got a lot going on in the month of June, including a number of guest spots and other shows and things like that. We also have a giant contest going on Instagram. for a subterranean press copy of Dark Age. There are 2 different options for entry. 1, joining our Patreon and commenting on that Instagram post with your username, or 2, leaving us a review on iTunes and commenting your username for that review on the post. You can check out all the details on our June 1st post with the giveaway. You can see it very clearly if you go to that Instagram page.
Absolutely. We do, speaking of the Patreon, want to take a second today to thank all of our new patrons. This is our first time actually speaking most of their names out loud, so bear with us a little bit.
Yeah, it's the first time. It's really cool. We're very excited. So our new barbacks at the $3 tier, we're very appreciative of everything that you do for the show. That would be Cassie Hurley, Donna Bull, Slip Al Wrath, Ivana M., Kyle Lieberman, good old friend of the show, That Juicy Juice, or Josh P., Josh Pullis, Kevin Friday, and Ben McDonald. Thank you so much.
We have one person at the bartender tier, Abe Lincoln Froman.
He left the review that we talked about last week.
He did.
/ 2 days ago. And to our fabulous mixologists, Baby Theo, Zeph Hawaiian, Daddy Zeph Hawaiian, Doris, Dvorkian, and Dandelo.
And thank you all that are listening for your support. It really means the world to us. We're stoked, of course, and can't wait to see where this all goes. We will see you next week.
Cheers.